South Central in the early 80s, it was like selling ice cream.
The crack epidemic continues to infiltrate neighborhoods.
It was like nothing the country had ever seen.
I wanted to be rich.
1 kilo became 2 kilos, and 2 kilos became 4.
Jemeker could put together $500,000 or $1 million drug deal.
She moved in with Daff.
We're at the top of our game, and then he gets killed.
This is where Jemeker Thompson comes into her own.
And I just said I wanted to just take this game to another level.
People in her organization, they did have lengthy criminal records involving violent crimes, some even murder.
It was a lot of violence around me. I felt that I would be next.
She went out on the run.
Nobody can last forever. You can't go and see your family. You can't see your little boy.
She makes the mistake a mother would make.
I carried a gun in my Chanel purse. At any cost, I was ready.
Now, on Gangsters, Jemeker Thompson, the Queenpin. In 1984, Los Angeles was a city with two faces. One for the world, about the city of angels, and one for the residents, about the plague of the devil.
They called it rock cocaine. From about 1984, when it first took hold in L.A., it hit the ghetto like a forest fire, and it was all over the inner city.
In 1984, the Olympics came to Los Angeles and built a high-security global village inside one of the fiercest gangland ghettos in the world, South Central. "75 square miles, 500,000 people, and in 1984, murder, rape, robbery, and assault rates more than double the Los Angeles city average.
The streets have become a battle zone where safety isn't an option.
People are scared to walk the streets. They're scared to sit on their porch. They can't even enjoy being home by themselves.
South Central is home to the Coliseum, where the 23rd Modern Olympiad was held.
I was just a young girl running track. I'm in the LA Times. I'm in the school paper every week. That was one of my dreams, to be in the Olympic Games.
One of the fastest girls to come out of South Central made it to the top of the other game in town. Jemeker Thompson, the Queenpin, indicted in a vast cocaine conspiracy. She would serve hard time for drug running, money laundering, and leaving a trail of misery in her wake.
I stopped running track. I got deeper into the game, and I still was running, except now for my life.
In the summer of 1984, Jemeker Thompson was on top of the world.
At that time, it was nothing for me to have 50 kilos of cocaine.
She and her husband, a hustler and gambler known in the neighborhood as Daff, had become a high-powered couple in the hood.
We had 3 dope houses. They ran 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. They never closed down. And money is being picked up every single day.
In preparation for the Olympics, the LAPD under Chief Darrell Gates conducted military-style operations, gang sweeps, rounding up gangsters and locking them up for the duration of the Summer Games. They cast a wide net, but they didn't catch the Queenpin.
It was a lot of violence around me. But the violence didn't affect me because I was protected because of who I was married to. At that time, the state of mind that I'm in, it didn't even bother me. I felt like I was untouchable. I always knew that drugs was illegal, but I just didn't think that I would ever be caught.
In 1984, Thompson's race had only just begun.
Being a woman in what was basically and still is a man's world, it made her unique. People were intrigued. They were curious. They wanted to get close to her. In the underworld, she was kind of a rock star.
She wasn't above violence herself, no matter the situation.
Everyone was scared of Jemeker in the streets. She caught you in a lie, well, there's consequences to that. She had a short switch, turn it off and turn it on.
Occasionally, she took matters into her own hands.
I was at Muhammad Ali's birthday party. She had heard that I was going to introduce her husband to one of my girlfriends who was very rich and very famous. So we actually had a big fist fight. The police came in, broke it up, and it was just a mess.
I don't care where I was. I don't care what I'm doing. I don't care what I had on. I would fight you and hurt you over my man.
You know, to get beat up in a club amongst Muhammad Ali and a lot of people, that was just crazy.
Jemeker knew that she wanted money. She wanted success. She wanted stature. You know, she wanted to be powerful. And for a woman in that era, that meant smashing through a whole lot of barriers.
I went over to her house, and she had a Ferrari, a turbo Porsche. I mean, every car that you could ever fantasize about. A brand new swimming pool. She had a housekeeper. She had everything that most women dream about. Like the reality shows that are going on now, that's like Jemeker been there, done that. I mean, years ago.
Money was my power. Money was my control. And that's what controlled me, the money. And I wanted the money.
The money took her out of South Central and put her on a bigger stage.
When I ran her in DEA's computer system, her name instantaneously came up. I had contacted the Los Angeles Police Department. Yeah, she's a major dealer, but we haven't got her. This DEA agent from New Orleans was familiar with Jemeker. The U.S. Marshals were even interested in her.
She had a reputation as someone who could put together a major drug deal. Now, you know, how many kilos? What I heard was, you know, $500,000 or $1 million drug deal, and could do it repeatedly, week in, week out.
You couldn't touch me. And if you did, I had enough money to buy you out or to get rid of you.
But in the summer games played in South Central in 1984, there wasn't enough money in the world to keep the wolf from the door.
I never thought that I would lose Daph.
The worst of the violence hadn't yet kicked in.
If somebody got killed in the game, it was chalked up to the game because that's the choice you made. It could have been me that got taken out. When you're in the game, it's things that happen in the game that you just deal with. Some live, some die in the game.
Jemeker Thompson became a Queenpin, in part because she was the perfect woman, in the wrong place at the wrong time.
In South Central, in the early 80s, it was like selling ice cream, selling powder cocaine. It was nothing for me to have 50 kilos of cocaine. and I'm only 18 years old.
It was a downtrodden area with a fairly high crime rate. You'd get low riders moving around in 22-inch rims with chrome that cost $10,000 and a stereo system that would be bigger than what a club would use. And that was sort of the mark that I'm dealing and I'm making a lot of money and you're not.
You had 19-year-old kids turning into millionaires practically overnight. It was like nothing the country had ever seen. Millions of people got addicted, did more damage than heroin ever even thought about doing. The gangs proliferated in numbers and in firepower and weaponry.
Authorities say the increase in gang violence may be drug-related.
A lot of violence went along with that.
I just know that I wanted to walk away from the game alive.
Jemeker's a product of the inner city. Her mother, when she was 4, divorced her father.
My mother was a very strong lady. As a single parent, you know, in South Central, you know, she did the best she could to provide a roof over our head.
Raising 5 kids, she fell short of the mark when Jemeker was only 3 years old. The family was evicted from their apartment.
It was sad and lonely and uncomfortable for me as a little girl. And it's something that I said that as I grew up, this would never happen to me.
She would spend her childhood shuttling back and forth between South Central and Mississippi, where her grandparents lived.
In my grandmother's house, everyone had to go to church every single Sunday. We had to do chores, we had to wash dishes, we had to cook. If you did anything that wasn't right, she would whoop you. So I got whoopings growing up.
By 9th grade, she was back in South Central for good, making a name for herself in competition.
She seemed more focused on being an athlete, and she did get a lot of attention for running track.
I was, you know, raised a tomboy because I was the only girl in my family. So I had boys around me all the time. So it was easy for me to connect with men.
She made a life connection with a man known in the neighborhood as Daff.
Daff was the HNC in charge. This was the head in charge.
He was the #1 man in the neighborhood.
He was one of those young men who announced his position in the streets at every turn.
Daff, as an example, had a lowrider, so I guess she liked fast cars, the big money.
His name was Anthony Mosley. He was 5 years older than Jemeker. He quickly began teaching her the hustle.
When I got in the 10th grade, and I began to sell marijuana at the school, and I was pulling in thousands of dollars. Daff would come to my school, and he would gamble and make bets when I would run during the track. His focus was making money off of me while I was running.
I was probably in 10th grade, and she and Daff were selling clothes. It wasn't a business. They may have been stolen. I don't know.
It was adrenaline to do that and know you were getting away with something.
It was only the beginning.
He spent a lot of money on her, showered her with a lot of gifts. I think when she was probably 16, 17, she got a house, and she moved in with Daff.
12th grade, we have graduated to like a U-Haul of marijuana, selling pounds of it.
He supplied the product. She brought in new customers. When she got out of school, they started a family. Anthony Jr. was born in the summer of 1982.
Once I had my son, I did not sell drugs anymore. I just would collect the money and pick up the money and drop the money off and put it in a safe place.
The money had become her addiction. Marijuana afforded them a new life in Encino, 25 miles from the streets of South Central.
The Jacksons stayed up the street from me, so I felt like I was a celebrity. I felt like I was untouchable.
In L.A., marijuana was probably the major drug until crack came.
The crack epidemic continues to infiltrate neighborhoods in the United States. This is an inexpensive high.
An industry that brings in over $100 billion.
I've seen a 17-year-old drive up here in El Dorado supposedly paid for in cash. These kids have thousands of dollars in jewelry on them and the same thing in their pockets.
There was a whole generation of young guys. They had the vision, they had the ambition, they had the drive, and they had the intellect, and they rose to the top. And because there was so little of any other kind of opportunity, where did they go? They went into the drugs. They went into the drug business.
Not all of them were guys. When crack descended on the city of angels, a Queenpin pounced on the opportunity.
In my mind, I just said I wanted to just take this game to another level.
When Daff was arrested on a weapons charge, police found a pistol during a traffic stop. Jemeker arranged his release. She was introduced to the next level by an old-school bail bondsman.
He introduced me to the cocaine. What the elderly man gave me, I sold it that night.
He was really popular, and I remember I wanted to actually meet him or get to know him because I had heard he had a lot of money.
I introduced the cocaine to Daff, and I told him that, I wanted to be rich, and I want to, sell this.
Jemeker pushed him and prodded him.
It seemed like he was more fascinated with the gambling than having a lot of people work for him.
My customers that I had from selling marijuana, I introduced them to the cocaine, and then eventually I brought in some workers. I had about 5 other people working for me that would distribute cocaine for me and Daff.
For long, 1 kilo became 2 kilos, and 2 kilos became 4. So it just multiplied.
She actually was storing hundreds of kilograms of cocaine in her garage.
The more I got, the more I wanted, and it was something that, it was my business. It became my business.
In 1984, the former track star watched Evelyn Ashford set a new Olympic record in the 100-meter dash. From the luxury of her Encino estate, the Queenpin was at the top of her game. 3 months later, it was over.
We're headed to the car wash, Personal Touch car wash on Florence and Western, where Daff was killed at.
Daff's murder, that was probably one of the early murders that you could attribute partly to the whole scene that was brought in by the rise of cocaine in the ghetto.
It happened at a car wash in South Central, a gambling spot where Daff had made his name.
I was married to his brother at the time, and when we heard about it, it was just devastating.
It was a phone call. I'll never forget that day.
Some guy came from the side of the building and shot and killed him. Like he shot him, I don't know exactly where it was, whether it was in his head or in his chest, but I know that he was shot from the side of the building.
There's a lot of people jealous of him because we're at the top of our game. And we're living life to the fullest, wanting for anything. We're together, we're family, life is great, and then he gets killed.
The murder was never solved.
That morning, I never made it to the car wash. I ended up going to the morgue to identify my husband, Daff.
She had a decision then, with 1 child. What does she do? Does she go down to the local city bank and apply for a job? She knows how to do what he was doing. She decided to take it to another level. And this is where I think Jemeker Thompson comes into her own.
One of the workers was like, Jemeker, I'm here for you, whatever you need, but you got to get back in the game. It's this house right here. This is the old house that we used to live in when we got evicted when I was a little girl. I told my mother, God's gonna give me something better than this house. Bigger and better things are in store for me.
She grew up on the run, a tomboy from South Central who was shipped to Mississippi. Back in L.A., Jemeker Thompson fell in love with a gangster at the age of 16, then became one herself.
I used to sell weed here, and this is where I was curb serving on this corner. We had like a U-Haul full of pounds of marijuana, and that all was right here on this block. I never said nothing to my mom about nothing.
When the game became cocaine, it got hard, fast.
It's still not clear, but we know it wasn't good. He wasn't defending somebody, and it wasn't, in a regular shootout.
Anthony Mosley was a player in a high-stakes game in the heart of the hood.
I mean, everybody was trying to get at Daff.
It's very sad, very hurtful, very lonely to lose someone that was your high school sweetheart, your husband, your baby daddy.
That was just like an eye-opener. Daff was like one of the first big major drug dealers to get killed.
It happened in November 1984, just as the wave of crack began to wash over South Central.
It just seems like after him, people were just getting killed left and right. Daff, he started it, and then it was like a trend. People were being found dead. It was awful.
It's no words that could express my feelings, my pain, my confusion, my loneliness, my anger. No words.
Numb with grief, she almost lost the other love of her life.
My son was 2 years old. A few months after Daff was killed, he fell in our pool. I had to jump in, pull him out, give him mouth to mouth. I was begging God not to take my son. Don't let my son die. I lost my husband. Don't take my son.
They spend a week in the hospital.
One of the workers came to the hospital to check on me and my son to see if we were okay. And he was like, Jemeker, I'm here for you, whatever you need. I want to help you, but, I need some work. All I had to do was make one phone call, and I was back in the game.
After the death of her husband, she starts to travel around. She's spreading out across the country.
Whenever it was a fight in Las Vegas, I always made it my business to be at the fights. And all the drug dealers from all over the world were at the fights. And so I met a lot of connections.
She chose men and charmed them, cultivating suppliers and buyers.
These were multi-millionaire guys, and these are notorious guys who most people were very intimidated by. She was just on a whole nother level.
Nobody knew who I was. Most of the men I met, I had more money than them, but they didn't know it.
She had connections all over, the South, Atlanta, Detroit, Illinois, St. Louis.
When I first started going out of town, it was crazy. I would wrap about 10 kilos around me and one of my girlfriends. 10 on her, 10 on me, and we just looked like fat women going through the airport.
We wrapped ourselves with saran wrap and a girdle, and we wore overalls, mink coats, cowboy boots. And I had my Bible, because I knew it was wrong.
She would take the cash back in large girdles. She'd put girdles on and stuff the cash in and whatever else she didn't want to be found out.
Once we get over there, I would get a joint room, me and her in one room, my connection on the other room, unwrap the kilos, do the switch, get the money, bam, out of there, back to LA.
Don't tell my mom. That's what I would say.
I felt like the world was mine because now I'm doing it by myself.
Let me just do a little bit of arithmetic for you. Out of a kilogram of cocaine, you get basically 1,000 grams. So if the price is $100 per gram, that's $100,000. If your investment at that particular time was $20,000, you made an $80,000 profit. Another factor was the quality of the cocaine. If you have a kilogram of pure cocaine, your cutting agent could be something like baking soda. You mix the two together and you have 2 kilograms of cocaine with 50% purity. That's $200,000.
Now we're not selling little stuff, we're selling kilos, 25, 50, or 100 at a time.
In 1987, she started up a business as a safety net for her and her son.
I knew that one day I wanted to be out of the drug game. And then I went to one of my friends that used to do my hair, and he said, why don't you, sell some hair? And that's where the idea came from. Next thing you know, I was off to Italy.
She went to Italy and realized that she could import hair and make these wigs.
She set up Hair Distributors Incorporated to help launder her drug money and started wearing her wigs to help sell the look.
Hairstylists and makeup artists, people that work with celebrities and musicians, Jemeker was known for getting the best hair that money could buy.
Jemeker Thompson had done what all good traffickers do. They say, hey, I'm making enough money to actually establish a legitimate business. I don't even care if I make money in that.
The hair business was good money. Wasn't enough quite for Jemeker.
She chased the money to a major buyer, a man she started dating in Illinois, known as Cheese.
That was his nickname. He was a musician, and he opened up a very profitable connection in Illinois.
Percy Bratton. And Percy Bratton becomes one of her best customers. And from 88 to 89, he's taking from her a pound coke, 2 pounds, 3, 5, 8. He ends up taking about 33 pounds over a little over a 2-year period, which is great sales. But it left a trail that eventually came down to haunt her.
Cheese kept on calling me, but I just didn't feel comfortable with talking to him anymore.
After traveling the world, the Queenpin got tired of going back and forth for her money to Alton, Illinois. Population, 25,000.
She had him start to wire it through Western Union, which of course leaves a trail. Now, there's not a lot going on in Alton, Illinois, so therefore they don't have 400 cases to worry about. There are no narco traffickers running around. There are no Islamic fundamentalists. So the DA and the FBI, they see these payments going out, they picked up on it right away.
We got quite a few Western Union money orders going from various members of the Bratton organization to Jemeker Mosley.
In April 1991, she was indicted on federal drug conspiracy and money laundering charges.
Once the indictment comes down, she's gone. She actually disappears, leaves her son. It tells you how serious this is.
At that time in my life, I carried a gun in my Chanel purse daily. I had to do what I had to do to protect me, and at any cost, I was ready.
In the spring of 1991, a fuse was lit in South Central.
2 words, not guilty, heard over and over in a Simi Valley courtroom on a Wednesday afternoon.
Convoys of police are on patrol everywhere tonight.
But Jemeker Thompson missed the violence and brutality, the uncertainty that engulfed her hometown. Just a month after Rodney King was beaten down by the LAPD, the Queenpin was indicted on cocaine and money laundering charges. She disappeared as South Central began to smolder.
Knowing you're wanted and you don't know who the police is, you don't know who's watching you. It wasn't normal, and it wasn't easy.
Federal agents raided her office that spring on a tip that she'd be there.
We went through the doors, and she was not there. And so the cat is out the bag for all practical purposes. There was a particular LA police patrol sergeant who came with us. The sergeant noticed right off the bat there was a plaque on the wall from an elementary school, an award that her son had obtained. So the sergeant gave me a nudge and pointed to that. He says, that may be useful in your investigation.
She was crazy about her son. He was probably 8, 10 years old at the time. And she decided that she couldn't go to prison.
She went out on the run, changing her phone number, her identity, not staying in one place too long.
She left her young son in the care of her mother.
As in Jemeker's case, you can't go and see your family. You can't see your little boy. Or if you do so, you do so at great peril, at great risk.
She had a network of powerful men across the country.
I went to Miami and St. Louis, Chicago, Detroit, and wherever.
I always said that I didn't trust none of the men that she was dealing with. That's what I believe where it started.
I lived one day at a time on the run. Freedom was important to me, to stay free.
Over the course of her career as a Queenpin, the government had changed the rules for punishment.
Up until that time, people might get convicted or they plead guilty, and they go for sentencing. And right up to the moment where the words came out of the judge's mouth, they'd be hoping that they would get probation or that they get a short prison sentence.
And I think this statute begins to focus the proper attention on the need to get to the kingpin.
This bill allows the president or the FBI and to make an average American subject to a decade in prison for doing business with such people.
Once the new laws took effect in 1986, these statutes carried a mandatory minimum 10-year prison. So all of a sudden, people realized there wasn't going to be a miracle.
She knew she was facing hard time if she got caught.
In the frame of mind that I was in at that time, I felt like I wanted the FBI to kill me. I wasn't turning myself in for nothing.
The system built in one exception to these mandatory sentences, and that was you talk with the government, you cooperate, you telling everyone you know. And up until that point, people didn't do that.
Some of my friends were getting busted for someone telling on them. The feds are looking at them, and they're getting arrested. So I felt that I would be next. I felt that I had a gut feeling that I'm going to be next.
2 years had elapsed, and by that time, we knew she was somewhere deep undercover, so to speak. She wasn't going to get caught.
With the money she'd made, she could have stayed out forever, but she put herself at risk. The Queenpin came home.
She makes the mistake a mother would make, because a good trafficker would never have allowed her feelings for her son to get in the way of staying free from the law. She comes back to California for his graduation from school in 1993, and she puts on a wig and everything else so no one will see her.
I called up the school to find out when a graduation date was going to be, and the school told me.
It was an inner feeling that I felt that, like, something wasn't right. What it was, I didn't know.
They stationed various deputies throughout the graduation ceremony, disguised as janitors.
I got out of the car and I walked up this way toward the auditorium.
The agents already knew who her son was, but they couldn't pick her out in the crowd at all.
I remember walking up this path and I can hear my son saying, "Mommy, Mommy, you made it."
After the ceremony had ended, there was a woman who came up to the son here and handed him a dozen roses.
The FBI came and told me, don't make a scene. You're under arrest. So I just asked the guy, I said, can I please just hug my son? And he let me hug my son. And they took me away, and they walked me to the car. And I can remember just looking back, you know, and I can see my son crying.
She was a gangster, but no matter how careful they try to be, nobody can last forever in this world.
In 1993, after 2 years on the run, the federal government captured a Queenpin. A major cocaine distributor was taken into custody at the graduation ceremony for her 12-year-old son.
Jemeker Thompson was involved with individuals. She was involved with organizations. If you wanted 30 kilograms of cocaine, she could get you 30 kilograms of cocaine.
She was caught on a hunch by a federal agent who'd been chasing her for years.
Her kid is supposed to be graduating on this particular date. That's all I had to give them.
The day that I came back to California and I went to my son's 6th grade graduation, I got arrested in front of him.
So that's ultimately how we caught Jemeker, and she was extradited from Los Angeles back to the Southern District of Illinois.
The feds had heard about me through other cases, other big cases, but nobody would turn over on me. Nobody would rat me out. Nobody would snitch on me. But that one guy, an ex-boyfriend of Ice Cheese, he told on me.
She never really believed that Cheese would testify against her.
Percy was afraid of Jemeker because he knew the type of people who she associated with, and that if he did not pay her, she had the means to harm him or his family.
Percy was also facing a drug conspiracy charge.
Percy, to get out of a lengthier jail term, realized that he wasn't going to roll the dice and hope that his defense attorney would get a not guilty verdict.
Every friend of Percy Braddon who possibly had met her gets on the stand to describe what a major cocaine trafficker she was. And she goes down.
In court, without the designer clothes and Italian hair, Jemeker Thompson was found guilty of conspiring to distribute cocaine and money laundering.
People were desperate. That's what took Jemeker down. Jemeker was never caught with drugs. She wasn't caught on a wiretap. She wasn't caught doing a drug deal. But other people were staring these 10-plus year prison sentences in the face, and they cut deals, and they pointed fingers at her in court at her trial. And that's what brought her and so many other people like her down.
Cheese was released from prison after serving 2 years and 4 months.
Jemeker was a significant trafficker in anybody's jurisdiction, whether it was Los Angeles, whether it was New York or Chicago. That's ultimately what brought her down.
Just before Christmas, 1993, the Queenpin was given 15 years of hard time. At the time of her sentence, she was 31 years old. She was taken to a maximum security facility.
I was in maximum security as a mistake for a year with lifers, people that they said would never go home, murderers, killers, everybody. I didn't associate with nobody, and I never told nobody what I was in jail for. And I was in jail with Griselda Blanco. I was in jail with Squeaky Fromm.
She focused on salvaging her hair business and starting over.
On her way to jail, I guess the only way to describe it, she was saved. and she accepted Jesus Christ in her life, and it changed her life around. She started to minister to prisoners in jail.
A lot of times, people will use that as an excuse, even in trial, that, Your Honor, I found out that my ways were wrong, and I've found God, and I'm a completely changed person. Well, that doesn't do much to change the situation.
I did speak to my son every single day unless I was on lockdown or couldn't get to a phone. So I would call him in the morning to say good morning, have a wonderful day at school, and then once a month he would come to visit me until he was about 16 years old.
As a young man, Anthony Jr. stopped visiting his mother and began living out the dream Jemeker had for herself as an athlete in South Central.
I would watch all the sports in prison, and one day they was showing skateboarding, and I just was watching it, and they said Anthony Mosley, pro skateboarder Anthony Mosley. And then I'm looking, and he looks identical to me, and I've just started hollering and just going screaming. And I'm like, that's my son, that's my son.
He's won skateboarding competitions across the world.
He didn't think it was all that big, but I just said, well, you know, I was blessed that he was a skateboarder and doing something that was legit, you know, and not doing what I was doing or what I did in my past.
In 2005, Jemeker Thompson became a free woman again. Having served 13 of her 15 years, she came back home to South Central.
When she got out, she established a ministry, you know, appropriately titled Second Chance Evangelist Ministry.
She is now an evangelical minister, helping people who have had drug addictions, who have had problems, who get out of jail, who can't find a job. So here's somebody who became a Queenpin and was good at it and would have kept growing. But when it all fell apart and she did the time, she was able to come out and be reborn.
She's put her story in a book entitled Queenpin, a memoir.
I'm here today to tell somebody else that you don't have to do what I did. You don't have to be like the other kids in the neighborhood. I had a second chance.
I hope that is the case, that if she wants to put this behind her and reach out to others, that is great. Certainly, I think she's capable, but she was a very significant drug dealer. She got 14 years in prison, and I feel that she was lucky to get the 14 years.